UFC 310 is this weekend. It's UFC's final pay-per-view of the year. Top to bottom, it's pretty solid, folks. But needle movers, I don't see many of them. But again, some well-known fighters, respected fighters that have paid their dues are on the card. It's our job to cover it, and we will do a fine job as always. Do you feel the buzz for UFC 310? And what would you grade the card going in?
Not a buzz yet. I think it'll start once you give Ian Garry a mic, but everybody else that has a mic, it's not going to really do too much, right? So I think it's really going to have to come down to some of those fighters on the undercard to promote a little bit. Going in, I have it somewhere around a B minus maybe. But look, I think there's a lot of fights that they may not tell a lot about what the picture is moving forward in a division. They're just kind of fun fights. And so I think overall the fight card's going to be a lot of fun.
You feeling the buzz, Mike Juan, or is this not one to your liking?
No, I like the card. I don't know what the definition of feel the buzz is here in 2024 when it comes to UFC events. If you look at ticket sales that are kind of going around the seating maps, it looks like they are struggling a little bit. I do not expect this to be a sellout. So a little bit on that front, but like if you're a UFC fan, you can't look at this card and look at all the names on there and like not be excited. This is better top to bottom lineup than probably half the pay-per-views this year. It's just kind of missing that big cornerstone main event. If we were still getting Bilal and Shavkat or whatever second title fight on here, I think it really changes it. But for better or worse, the flyweights headlining a pay-per-view card is always just going to be a tricky sell. You have literally a debuting UFC fighter on one side of this, and then Pantoja, who's not going to give you a whole lot in terms of, going out there and selling a fight. So that makes it difficult, but the fights are good. There's some important ones on here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Steve Williams in the chat says, definitely pumped for 310. Strong B+. Mohammed Barry says, this UFC fanboys, UFC journalists, not MMA journalists. Hey, Pelican, we just spent fucking 40 minutes on PFL. Why are you tripping, man? I mean, did you just join the party or what? Holy cow. I mean, at least know where you stand when you're trying to dole out a bag. All right, Matt Wells, are you feeling the buzz despite Mohammed Barry's input?
To Mike's point, like, what is buzz, right? I am excited for the card because there are a lot of familiar names throughout. And I really think the main event is actually like flying way under the radar. As I've said before, like this is the closest thing we're going to get to a cross-promotional fight in the UFC, bringing in a former Ryzen champion to fight for a title in his first fight. And I love that. I love it. I think Alexandre Pantoja is a fantastic fighter. He's been through wars against the best in his division. And now we get to see him fight a former champion of another promotion. It's fantastic. I think all of the big buzz, so to speak, is for the co-main event in Shavkat and Ian Garry, because, obviously those personalities, those performances have spoken for themselves throughout their careers. And I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in for that fight. But, man, that main event, I think, is going to be something special that's flying under the radar.
Joseph Bose is saying that Crone Gracie and Bryce Mitchell are on the main card. Is that true, guys? Or did I just...
Yep.
And so really Movsar Evloev, who's undefeated, and Aljamain Sterling, who's a former champ, are not.
Correct.
Wow. I feel like they're dropping the ball on that one. Because even though the other two may not be the most stylistic appealing type, it's two that might cancel each other out, and they bring resumes. Crone Gracie, for crying out loud, he hadn't fought in 40 years. Club just pieced him up. Someone else, he started off good, but he's 36 years old. Respect to what he did at Abu Dhabi, but man, this is that's just I'm throwing.
It's not worth stressing about, honestly. Like, we could get to Friday and they could change this whole thing. Like, they do this all.
I certainly hope they do.
Everyone just take a breather.
Is Pantoja the most underrated champion? Why or why not, Mike Bond?
Ooh, the most underrated current champion. I guess so, just because, like, I don't know. It's hard to say that because how many champions do we have right now who like don't even have a title defense or one title defense? He's like one of the few who's actually been a long term in the UFC. So I guess so. I mean, that's always kind of part of the territory when it comes to flyweight. And as I said earlier, he doesn't necessarily knock your socks off when it comes to promoting the fight. We have an interview I did with him a few days ago on the YouTube channel right now, and he was good. I mean, you can tell he's focused. He doesn't overlook the task at hand, all that kind of stuff. But Yeah, I mean, he's not going to give you these crazy headlines or anything, but in terms of skill sets, sure, like he's a fantastic fighter. He is 9-0 against current fighters ranked in the top 10 of the UFC flyweight division, which is absolutely incredible. So yeah, I mean, there's no one that's really dominating a division the way he is right now. So I think you'd have to answer that question as yes.
Yeah, no, profoundly. All right. Goes, is he the second best flyweight ever, in your opinion? Has he at least gained that?
I think he's right there, man. Right next to him, I'd have Henry Cejudo. I'd love to see what a fight of those two guys in their prime would have looked like, but he does deserve more credit than he gets, and he just quietly does his job. But little by little, every year when we have our end of the year discussions, you look at the stuff this guy's done is pretty amazing, and I think he's only going to add to it.
Matt Wells, what's the best result in the main event for the UFC? Stick with the champ, Pantoja, or the land of the rising sun? It's always a good thing if there's a star coming out of that country, a champion. I have to believe that as much as an appeal as it was to get into China, and they have, getting back to Japan, where a lot of this has originated, would be big, right?
Yeah, it would be huge. And as much as I agree with like Pantoja, being like a underrated or flying under the radar champion, so to speak, I think the best for business result here would be a win for Kai Asakura, because not only do you get all of those things that you just mentioned, George, but you also get a whole slew of new, fresh championship matchups against a guy that has never fought any of these other guys in the UFC before. Whereas if Pantoja wins, we're looking at rematches through two different Brandons and everybody else down the roster, right? So I think the best for business move is for the regional success in Japan and all of the fresh championship matchups going forward, and then we can have all sorts of conversations about who deserves the next shot and all that kind of stuff like that. And I think that would just be, the one thing that the UFC would really benefit from.
It has been rematch central, man, at 125 pounds. That's for sure. How funny would it be if they rematch Asakura and Pantoja if they have a classic? Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry. Should it have been for the interim? Mike Bond. It's a number one contender, but should it have been for the interim? And we do know it's a 5-rounder.
I'm going to say no. I think they made the right call just because from the sounds of it, Bilal Muhammad isn't going to be out all that long. Like, he sounds like he could be ready to fight by March. And how many times have we sat on the show and criticized the UFC for over abusing the interim titles or putting it in place when it doesn't make sense? They made the right call here. I think maybe there was some perks offered to both guys, like contractually wise, that maybe you would get if you were fighting for an interim title anyways within this fight. So I don't think it matters too much. I don't know if it's going to be pay-per-view points or just more money for this fight in particular, but yeah, I think, this is one of the right calls to kind of not do it, just given the shit we've given the UFC over the years for putting so many of these interim titles in place when they didn't fully make sense. But Dana White has made it clear. I think it's pretty clear to most of us, like, this is a title eliminator. It's a number one contender fight. You got two guys, 33-0 combined record, which, you don't get this very often. So yeah, I do think they made the right call avoiding this time around.
Goes, you agree? Should it have been for the interim, or you like the way it is?
No, I think it worked out perfect, and I think there are those incentives, that kind of made it worth their time. And props to Shavkat for taking this fight. I think everything actually worked out the way it should have, which is not something we normally say, right, when it comes to the UFC and their decisions.
Matt, both of these guys are undefeated, so I wanted you to concentrate here on this question. It might be a trick question. I don't know. Who's shown more promise and star power? Or might it be one of each? I don't know. Because one guy is undefeated, all finishes, but the other guy's one hell of a talker and pot stirrer.
Yeah, I think that's the fact that would make a bigger star, right? Is what you do on the mic. He's got the Irish support as well, right? I think Garry is going to be the bigger potential star just based on those things. He gets the crowd riled up, as you can see in this. Another wonderfully timed B-roll clip from Cold Coffee right there, right? He gets the crowd amped up before he even does what he does inside the cage, which has also been fantastic. Undefeated record that always speaks volumes as well. So I would have to go with him. But man, people really love Shavkat. There's something about the guy that doesn't say anything on the mic as well. Like, as much as everybody falls in love with the super brash trash talker, whether you love him or hate him, the guy that doesn't say much at all, that just shows up and kicks ass every single time, also draws a certain level of interest. But I would have to lean Gary if I'm picking one.
Speaking of leans, that's my next question. Which way you all leaning? I'll stay with you, man. Go ahead.
Man, you know what? I'm gonna say Gary. And when I say Gary, I'm literally like fence riding this fight. I'm probably gonna submit my pick at the very last moment. I need to see how they're looking at fight week, maybe a face off, whatever have you. Like I don't know, man. This is such a good fight on paper. It's very hard to pick. Both guys are very talented. Undefeated again, man. This is a hard fight to pick for me.
All right, how about you, Goes?
I think Shavkat. I think his pressure on Gary is just going to keep him on the defensive for more of the fight than he wants. So that'll be my pick.
It's that big octagon too. That does help out Gary, man. That guy can, the way he just creates space is incredible. But Shavkat's a beast. How about you, Mike Bond? What's your early lean, or is this your final pick? Is it a slam dunk?
I don't know if it's a slam dunk. I want to give myself a little bit of an opening just to see how these guys interact and how they look. But right now, I do feel I'm leaning a little towards Shavkat. I mean, it's hard to pick against a guy who hasn't lost a fight, let alone made it to a decision and finished every single opponent. There has been, some dicey moments for Ian Garry in the UFC. You could probably pick, one or two fights that maybe there's an argument he should have lost on the scorecards. So there's none of that with Shavkat because he's never even been to the scorecards. So until I see someone, I guess, take him beyond a point that we've seen him pushed as of now, I feel like you just got to continue picking him until proved otherwise.
Not to mention the stories coming out of Killcliff, but hey.
Yeah, there's that whole element. I mean, how much, obviously he's been training for this date and this card and was training for a championship fight, like the highest level, for several months. Ian has seemingly been all over the place. He started, I think, his camp in Brazil, then he was in Thailand and doing all this stuff. And, it seems like that has worked out well for him. He likes to be a bit of a globetrotter, that, whether you believe the stories of him being kind of sent away from certain gyms or not, that's kind of led to this approach he's taken to the sport. And it has seemed like it meshes well with his personality and all his stuff. So who's to say? But if you look at kind of who has seemingly had the less bumpy road to this fight, you got to imagine it's Shavkat, considering he was scheduled for this date from day one.
Do you know if he was just getting looks, or is he no longer with Shootbox? Looked like he had found a home at Shootbox.
No, I think he still is. Again, he'll talk about that this week, I'm sure. But I think I saw him post an Instagram video where he was like, representing Shootbox from here in Thailand or something like that.
Folks, we're going to cover it top to bottom. So focus on MMA Junkie throughout the week. This channel here will have a lot of content, but yeah, I mean, we're going to put it all out there, the countdowns, the embeddeds, and all the different stories, the one-on-ones. One thing we ask here is if you can hit the like button on this and any content that you see. It's so easy to do, and it helps us out a ton, and that gives us more resources to continue covering the sport and do the excellent job that we do. Subscribe to the channel. It can't hurt, right? And if you hit that little bell, it'll notify you when we're on live. We're almost done here. Don't forget, UFC 310 is this weekend. Goes and I will be doing a watch along starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the 4 featured prelims on prior to the main card, which is a pay-per-view. And that's at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. If you choose not to get the pay-per-view, Goes and I will be your eyes and ears. Tune into us. And our colleague, Farah Hanoun, will be doing a preview show at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, and she'll preview the card there with all the latest info. How did they look at the weigh-ins throughout the week? What's that, Mike? You're on the show?
Yeah, I'll be on with Farah.
Okay, he'll be on there. That's good stuff there. That's a nice 1-2 punch. Hey, how about Gon and Volkov? These are some big guys, talented guys. One's a former interim champ. The other guy's been on a roll. What do you think, Matt? What do you like out of these big dudes? You even have a prediction for us, or how do you see this fight playing out?
I think there'll be a finish for sure. Which way it goes, I would probably lean Gon to win this fight. But both of these guys are just kind of stuck in a position right now, like right outside that heavyweight title picture, to where no matter what happens, they're not going to be next up for a title, unless if the UFC decides to make another interim title defense for Tom Aspinall. So who knows? They're kind of in a weird spot, but I think Gon's going to figure out a way to get this one done.
That's the thing. These last few months, all we're thinking is Miocic, Jones and Aspinall. We forgot these are two pretty good guys. Goes, where do they fit into this title picture? It does look like if Jones sticks around, he might fight Aspinall. We know Miocic is now out of the whole equation, but these two should be fighting for something, I imagine.
What is it though? That's the problem, right? As long as John Jones is at the top of that division, there is no division. There's John Jones, there's Tom Aspinall, the ghost of Francis Ngannou, and then everything else, right? There's so much uncertainty. We have no idea from fight to fight what's going to happen with John Jones. It's got to be very frustrating for those guys underneath. They're just going to keep. It's going to be a revolving door. They got to keep trying to keep that streak going. But as long as John Jones is at the top, there's just uncertainty at the top of the division.
Mike, we covered this early. Evloev and Sterling, fair or foul, man, on the prelims as of this moment. You covered the UFC for a long time, so you know how their workings are. I just can't put my head around why Kron Gracie and Bryce Mitchell would be there and not these guys. In the past, we used to hear we need a fight to sell the pay-per-view, but then part of the argument why they might not even be on the main card is because they're not sellable products when they fight. They tend to go to decisions and maybe grapple more than what most fans want. What are your thoughts on this?
It's hard to say. I mean, like Aljamain Sterling didn't do himself any favors with the UFC 300 performance. I feel like Movsar Evloev has never had a fight that's not gone to a decision in the UFC. It's been all decisions for him. So maybe that's some of the thinking. Like, you don't want to have a momentum killer in the middle of your main card, but also like these guys deserve it given their rankings and their acumen and stuff. So it's a weird one. I mean, I can't get too worked up about it just because this, first of all, could change. And second of all, we're going to be there watching all the fights anyways. So me watching Aljamain Sterling an hour and a half earlier than we would have if he was on the pay-per-view, like, isn't going to bother me too much. So I don't know, like a respect thing. I definitely get it. Aljo spoke out on it. We have a story on the site about that being like,
okay.
I'm a main card fighter. I'm going to show the UFC they messed up with the spot. So it seems like there is a bit of a motivation there, but yeah, you just look at the style matchup. I can see it a little bit, but on the other side, people are like, they put it on the prelims because they'll draw more attention and more eyeballs like towards the build up to the pay-per-view. But if it's going to be a bad fight, you almost want to give it to them on the pay-per-view when it's already paid for and stuff too. So I don't know. There's a counterbalance to all this stuff.
There is.
I'm not going to freak out about it, but yeah, I wish it was higher, and it's, a very important fight for this featherweight division.
I was just going to ask you, what does this fight mean for featherweights, for these two?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I guess Max Holloway gone. That's kind of out there, but we assume even though Evloev has beat Diego Lopez, I think Diego Lopez is still ahead of him in the title queue right now. So I assume we're going to get the Volkanovski Topuria rematch maybe in April or around that range. And then will Diego fight someone else to kind of get there? Will he get the title shot after? I don't know. I feel like these guys probably are going to have to win one more after this.
Goes, give me another highlight from this event. Somebody that's not getting any shine, maybe gets buried amongst this talented, stacked UFC 310 card that you think might steal the show.
Well, like I said, I think a lot of fights on here are just going to be fun fights. And I think one that's going to be a lot of fun, it's going to be that cartoon where you see that bubble and just fists and feet flying everywhere. That's going to be Guida and Hooper. I think those guys are going to murder each other. And who knows? Every time Clay Guida steps in there, we wonder, when's it going to be the last one for him? Here in Vegas, a good win, maybe. You never know. But I think that'll be a fun fight.
Which one's yours, Matt? Who steals the show on Saturday night?
I think Max Griffin and Michael Chiesa is going to be a fun fight. I'm just a fan of both of these guys in general. They both seem like good dudes. They don't really get themselves into any trouble. And they just show out. They show up and they really just, give it their all every time they fight. Max Griffin's a guy who's very competitive in every single fight. I mean, even the loss against Michael Morales, he won that first round, but then Michael Morales is just a dog. He's like the future of that division, I think. So he's always a competitive fighter. And I just like his style. And then, Chiesa, like I said, is a good dude. And he's also super competitive in a lot of his fights. And he's coming off that win over Tony Ferguson there. So I think that's going to be an interesting one. But let me chime in real quick on the Evloev Sterling thing.
Sure.
Like, it's just a respect thing for me, the placement, right? You got a former champion who moved a division, won his first fight in that new division, fighting an undefeated fighter who could be potentially fighting for a title, in one fight or in the next fight. And you're putting that underneath a matchup between, two guys that are coming off of losses. It just doesn't make sense. Respect for me is what it is. I mean, if you're talking about getting eyeballs on the prelims, put the guy who brought the Bible into the cage and screamed freedom. Put that guy on the prelims, right? That should bring eyeballs, right?
Yeah, I agree, man. He's undefeated for a reason, and the other guy's a former champ. This might be the fight that breaks out for them. Mike, how about you? Who do you want to shed a spotlight on?
We'll give a little to Randy Brown and Brian Battle. I think that's a fight that's probably going to get someone into the rankings after that at welterweight. Both have been looking exceptional over the past few years. Obviously, Brian Battle's coming off that very memorable fight in Paris, the post-fight interview and all that. So, yeah, I think both these guys are clicking right now. And, yeah, actually, like an important fight. This is some good matchmaking with these two. I really love this fight. But since Matt chimed in on another topic at the end of his, I will just say about Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov, the funniest outcome for the division would be Alexander Volkov winning, because even if John Jones retires and he's gone, and you have looking at someone for Tom Aspinall, the big fight that Cyril Gane's been ducking him, allegedly all this stuff, turning it down. If he loses, obviously Tom Aspinall beat Volkov not that long ago. So that would be a really tricky sell, even though he's looked really great since then. So yeah, that heavyweight division, I think Volkov winning is like a complete shit show for it, but we'll see what happens.
Mike is here for the chaos.
Yes.
Yeah.